I rise to offer arguments in support.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 15, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-108, offered by Mr. Denham of California.
Pursuant to House Resolution 260, the gentleman from California, Mr. Denham, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of my amendment to authorize the enlistment in the armed forces of undocumented immigrants who entered the U.S. under 15 years of age, who entered the country on or before December 31st, 2011, and who are otherwise qualified for enlistment. This amendment will also provide a way for this group of undocumented immigrants to be lawfully admitted to the United States for permanent residence by reason of their honorable service and sacrifice in the United States military. As a nation, we have never made citizenship a requirement for service in our armed forces. Half of the U.S. military enlistees in the 1840s were immigrants, and more than 660,000 military veterans through naturalization between 1862 and 2000. Mr. Speaker, I have worn the uniform. I have served with many immigrants. In Desert Storm in Somalia, my uncle and godfather served with immigrants during the Vietnam. Grandfather, grandmother served in Korea, where Europeans were encouraged to sign up for the United States military. Filipinos from 1947 to 2000 were encouraged to sign up and serve in the military. This is one opportunity for those that have gone to school here, that have graduated from high school, that are in our communities, show their ultimate support for this great nation, and are willing to sacrifice in support of our country. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Who seeks time? What purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise? Seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I yield the time to Ms. Becerra of California.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to engage the gentleman from California in colloquy, if I may.
The gentleman from Washington does control the time.
And I would ask that the gentleman allow us to engage in a colloquy.
No objection to the gentleman.
You'll have to stay standing. And Mr. Larson, what I'd like to ask the gentleman from California, Mr. Denham, is that in conversations that have taken place between members on this particular amendment, there is obviously quite a bit of support on this side of the House for legislation that would honor the service of any American, including those Americans who had come to this country through no fault of their own, without documentation, had essentially become Americans through their time as youngsters in this country, and then wanted to fulfill service to this nation by applying to serve in our armed forces. This amendment, however, has some flaws in it that make it very difficult for the very people that the gentleman is trying to help to actually receive the opportunity to serve our country and then be able to adjust their status to lawful permanent residence and ultimately, we hope, to become U.S. citizens. There's also a further flaw in the bill that would prevent any part of this from ever taking effect unless the gentleman were able to find the resources to implement this. And as he and I discussed before this amendment was put on the floor, that would be very difficult unless we were prepared to make some substantial changes to the current funding of some very important mandatory programs, including retirement pay for our soldiers, TRICARE, which is health care services for our military service members, mortgage refinancing for our service members. So I would ask the gentleman if the gentleman was intent on pursuing this amendment today, or if he was prepared to withdraw and have further conversation to see if these flaws could be corrected. I would also note that for many of us who have been working for over 20 years to try to reform a broken immigration system, this is certainly one aspect of a broken immigration system that must be fixed. But there are any number of hardworking individuals in this country who we believe through a comprehensive fix of our broken immigration system would have an opportunity to show all American citizens that they have tried to work very hard to earn a chance to become tax-paying American citizens. And so while many of us prefer to be able to deal with all aspects of a broken immigration system, this is certainly one that truly needs to be dealt with and it deserves attention. But this amendment has two very substantial flaws, and I would ask the gentleman what his intentions are with regard to pursuing this amendment on the floor this evening. And with that, I would, with the permission of our ranking member, I would ask that he be yielded time, Mr. Denham be yielded time to respond.
Without objection, I would ask that it happen.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Denham, is recognized.
In addressing his concern about the cost of this bill, it is yet to be defined. This is something that we will need the administration to define the costs as we would with any bill that would go through the appropriation process. We look forward to working not only with the gentleman from California on this amendment, but certainly working with the administration to define an unknown cost that we are realizing today.
Would the gentleman yield?
If I could just ask Mr. Larson.
How much time do I have left, Mr. Chairman?
2.5 minutes.
I'll yield a minute.
1 minute to the gentleman from Virginia.
Well, I actually would prefer to have the gentleman from California, Mr. Denham, yield to me. So,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to reserve the balance of my time.
Reserves. Gentleman from California, Mr. Denham.
Yield the gentleman from Virginia a minute.
I thank very much the gentleman for yielding. And I also want to tell him how much I appreciate him raising this very important issue. There is no doubt that individuals who were brought to the United States as young children by their illegal immigrant parents are the most sympathetic group of people not lawfully present in the United States in the U.S. today, and that's particularly true of those who desire to serve in the armed forces of the United States. We should embrace these individuals whose goal it is to integrate into American society and live and work by the rules of our nation. This is an issue we plan to look at in the Judiciary Committee. And so I want to thank the gentleman from California, Mr. Becerra, also for raising the issue in the context of our overall efforts to deal with immigration reform. And if the gentleman from California will withdraw his amendment, I would commit to him to work with him in addressing the situation and immigration status of these individuals. This should and can be done in the broad spectrum of the entire immigration debate, which, as you know, we are fully engaged in the House Judiciary Committee.
Gentleman from California, Mr. Denham.
I would reserve. I look forward to working with the gentleman, but at this time I'd like to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Washington.
Mario.
We continue to reserve the balance of our time.
Gentleman from California.
Yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Florida.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I rise actually to thank you for, Mr. Denham, for bringing up this very important issue. The gentleman mentioned historically the great, frankly, the great contributions that the folks that he's mentioning today, people just like that, have made throughout our history. And let me tell you, Mr. Denham, you're bringing up an issue which I am glad finally somebody has brought up. And I know you're going to continue to, as you have, shown the leadership on this issue that you've had from day one. I just, for one, want to tell you that I'm willing to do whatever I can to be of help, because I think the issue that you have brought up today is essential, not only for a group of individuals, but more importantly, for the national security interests of the United States. So again, thank you, sir, for bringing this up, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from California reserves.
Reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Chairman, do I understand that we have the right to close?
The gentleman is correct.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to yield a minute to Mr. Becerra of California.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I appreciate the gentleman from California being willing to withdraw the amendment, and certainly appreciate the work of the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Goodlatte, in proposing that we try to resolve this in this chamber. I think we want to make it very clear, as I think every one of my colleagues who has spoken on this amendment has said, this is an important issue because we have a lot of young Americans who are trapped in a situation where they have to live in the shadows. And especially for those who wish to provide service to our country in uniform, I think all of us believe if you're willing to give that highest call of order, highest calling of service, that we want to be there to be not only appreciative of your service, but recognizing the valor involved. And so I want to make sure we're very clear. We all support the notion of trying to help these young Americans who are Americans in everything but legal title, the opportunity to serve this country. This amendment, unfortunately, would not accomplish that if it were to go forward, and that's why I think it's so important, as Mr. Goodlatte, our chairman of the Judiciary Committee, pointed out, that we withdraw the amendment and try to make corrections so we can get to the point
Gentleman's time has
of dealing
expired.
with immigration reform. I yield back.
Gentleman from California,
Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have remaining?
you have 1.5 minutes.
I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Colorado.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the gentleman from California for yielding and for bringing up this critical issue. My father was a veteran of both World War II and Korea, and he taught me growing up that there's no greater demonstration of American citizenship than serving one's country in the military. And in my congressional district, there are a lot of young people who came to this country by their parents illegally, who grew up in the United States, who went to school here, and who want to serve this country in the military. It is the only country that they've known. And so they ought to be afforded the right to do that and to demonstrate what is the greatest, I think, form of citizenship, and that is service in the United States military. And so I think that this is something that we've got to accomplish as a part of comprehensive immigration reform, and something certainly that will make our country better, a better place. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Washington has 1.25 minutes remaining.
Mr. Chair, we continue to reserve the balance of our time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California has 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just finish by saying the precedence is here. Legal permanent residents are already serving in our military. From America Samoa, from Micronesia, from Palau, we have a long history of over 660,000 immigrants serving in our military from other countries. This seems like something that should be a bipartisan, common sense way to address this problem, allowing people to not only being able to serve in the military, that great opportunity that they have, but ultimately the ultimate sacrifice, giving your life for a great country like this. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw my amendment.